Welcome. This is December 28th. This is our Q&A, and we are going to be asking questions and answering them about gardening things tonight. We have a fun topic about raised beds, so we're going to talk about that. And we are going to be talking about homesteading, farming, gardening, soil health, permacultural, liberal arts, silvopasture, biodynamics, livestock, food, politics, famine, Georgics, ranching culture, agronomy, horticulture, holistic management, current events, freedom, and environmentalism. We won't talk about all that tonight, but these are the things that we talk about on this Q&A every Thursday night, except for Thanksgiving and other nights when I don't feel like doing it. So here we go. This is brought to you by survivalgardenseeds.com. Get your seeds there. I have a greenhouse full of seeds, full of plants that are growing from Survival Garden Seeds. Jason's my friend. He's the owner and one of the co-founders of Survival Garden Seeds. Me and him hit it off at a seminar last year, and I decided to promote his seeds because I grew some of them, and I like them. 9 ways I help you grow food. I have a newsletter. Go to my website, www.georgicrevolution.com. Sign up for my newsletter. Read my book, Worry for Eating. I can do consulting for you to help you have the best farm in the world. I do 3-day boot camps. One's coming up in just a couple of weeks. Georgic Schoolroom is 17-week long class in the summertime. I'm a laboratory to do soil tests. I was in my microscope for hours today, analyzing people's soil. It was wonderful. I was in the world of fungus. It was so great. There was all kinds of fungus in the test I did today. Not much protozoa, no nematodes, which means that was late succession. In all the soil tests I've ever done, this is the only one that anybody's ever sent me that was in late succession. It was fantastic. I can go to forests and pull my own samples and find late succession, but nobody has ever sent me one until I got the one today. I do weekly Q&As. That's what tonight is. And of course, I have a YouTube channel. Those are the 9 ways I help you grow food. On February 22nd through May 16th, on Thursday nights of this Q&A, we are going to be discussing some of the really fantastic books to help us have a mindset of the Georgic tradition, to be able to understand what is happening. And so get these books, read them, so that you know what they are. You can go to our website to find a list of these books. But I'll tell you real quick what they are right now. Winter Room, One Straw Revolution, As a Man Thinketh, Green Grass in the Spring, A Message to Garcia, Searching for Home, Finding Grace, The Strangest Secret, 12 Rules for Life, Holistic Management, Dirt to Soil, Worry-Free Eating, The Lessons of History. Boot camp in 2 weeks, January 11th, 12th, and 13th. I still have room for a couple of people to show up. If you want to be in my garden with me for 3 days learning how to grow your own food and have the most fantastic garden in the world, then come to Winter Boot Camp. Our summer Georgic Schoolroom starts on site here in Clover Valley, Nevada, May 20th, and it goes through the summer, September 14th. Come to this class, and you can graduate with an ecological literacy. Once you leave, you'll be able to walk out into nature and graduate from this class and be able to know what nature is telling you when you walk out there and you look at stuff. So it'll be super awesome. This will be the 3rd year I've done it. The first year, I had Tim and Jess here. And then this last year, I had 4 students. So there are at least this many people in the world who are ecologically literate, which is so cool. Who's ever heard of ecological literacy? That's not a thing, except I invented it. So it's pretty awesome. But there's hundreds of people who are ecologically literate around the world. You know, we just don't know about them. It's kind of like the cowboys. They're there, but we don't see them from the road. Tonight's fantastic subject is the pros and cons of raised beds. So what we're going to do here is let's just take a quick look at the raised beds in our world and see what we can understand about them here. Raised beds can be really fantastic and wonderful in most situations. Raised beds will do well in every single climate. If you are in an extremely dry climate, keep your raised beds, keep them close to a water source because they're going to dry out faster. So that's the big con of raised beds. In dry desert areas, you have to have a lot of extra water. So if you're growing food in a dry farming situation and you don't have enough water during the heat of summer, then build the opposite of a raised bed, which would be a sunken bed. Now, if you're in the high desert of the western United States and you have snowfall that melts, you still need a raised bed because when the snow melt comes down, you still need to get things planted early in the year. So sunken beds don't work that good. But if you are in the true deserts of the world, if you're in the Sahara, the Gobi, possibly the Mojave in North America, and there's other deserts. But if you're in some of these places, sunken beds can really be a good friend of yours. Most of North America, raised beds are probably a good idea. There's another big con to raised beds. If you have sides on your raised bed, like a board, and they sell those kits that are like plastic raised beds, between the crack of the board and your garden soil, that is the perfect place for slugs and snails to hide. And then at nighttime, they come out and they eat your plants. So I don't like raised beds with sides on them, but that's just me. But anyway, raised beds are really great. It makes the garden higher and taller, so you don't have to bend over so much. You can use really specific soils and mix your own soil mix. And if you have really noxious weeds in your soil, or let's say you have a problem with toxicity in your soil, then you could create a soil, put it in a container, like a great big watering trough. Those are pretty popular nowadays. You go to somewhere like an Intermountain Farmer or an Orscheln's or a Tractor Supply Company, and you buy livestock water tanks, and you just fill that up with potting soil. And that will keep the native weeds that are in the soil from growing and infesting your garden. Because it's a barrier that between your garden and where that is. Let's say if you're on contaminated soil that you know is toxic and you don't want to be growing your food in it, then that would be a good thing too. So those are good pros of raised beds, to create that definite boundary between the two problems there. It works really good to create a raised bed to have a boundary between play areas where you have children and pets and that kind of thing. So that's a good thing to do. The raised bed works really good in climates where you have tons and tons of water. So if you're in the mountainous regions and you have 2 or 3 months of snow melt, then raised beds are good because that high water table will be draining out, so the roots of your plants are away from the water. If you're in a climate that has rains throughout the summer, sometimes it's great to have raised beds so that your plant's roots don't get waterlogged. When the water drains out of the raised bed, then it sucks oxygen in, and oxygen is the most important nutrient in our soils. So those are just some simple pros and cons of raised beds. If you need more information about this, I recommend that you come to one of my classes, and we have many of those. So that is the end. Do we have any questions tonight? If you have a question, unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it.
I do have a question. Actually, I have a couple questions. My first one is about the whole raised bed thing. When you're doing raised beds, is it advisable to start out with a good potting mix, or could you do something where, you mound up a whole bunch of just like you're going to make a compost pile, except you just plant plants in it?
Yeah, so both of those work. That just depends on context of what it is you're trying to do. I mean, with some raised beds, you certainly could just, make your own soil, and you could, create that for the specific plants that you're wanting to grow. And you can just, use the native soil that's there. It's very much a contextual question you're asking. Like farmers who have like 100 acres of vegetable farm, they have a machine that goes behind a tractor and it forms a raised bed. So it builds a raised bed as the tractor drives through the field. So the raised bed simply means that you're pulling dirt up and making a thicker, deeper root zone so that there are ditches on either side of it or a space where water can drain away so you don't have puddling in the middle of where your plants are growing. So, all of those different types of uh, configurations are a raised bed. A lot of times people think of a raised bed and they're thinking of a box that you make out of wooden sides. Yeah, that's certainly a raised bed, but there's a lot of others too. Okay, what's your next question?
This one is off topic. I hope that's okay. But so there's a lot of debate about environmentalism and what we should be doing with the climate. And there's a lot of what some people call it alarmism. Other people just say, it's education and it's raising awareness about problems. And what you're talking about here with restoring land that's damaged and really working to help the land be better and help people be able to stay on their land seems, if not directly relevant, certainly adjacent. And I'm wondering if you have any opinions or thoughts about like what we should be doing as people that are relevant to that whole discussion and debate.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a good question, and it's certainly appropriate to talk about because we're dealing with the environment all the time when we're growing food. So what I tell people to do is do what works. So when you look at let's just go to an extreme for a minute. When you look at the political agendas of environmentalism, most of their solutions don't really work. There's not a practical thing that they show people how to do that makes a real impact to families and people. It doesn't really better our lives. It's just this great big nightmare of an argument that people are having about industry and pollution, and we don't even know if what they're talking about is even true or factual. So I say just do what actually works. So, what does that mean? And if you've got my book and read it, then you know kind of what I mean about that, because I do go into those details for sure. But I will go as far as to say that, yeah, we can increase the rain on our own land if we have enough land to deal with. It only takes 10,000 acres to change your local water cycles. And this has been proven, over and over again. It's just that the mainstream media never talks about it because it's not popular to have a real solution. If we have a real solution, then they don't have anything to argue about anymore. So that's my jaded opinion about that. Did that answer your question?
I mean, I think so, yeah. So do you think that we need, I mean, realistically, does someone need 10,000 acres before they can start making a difference in this?
Well, no, I mean, a community, could certainly get together and put their heads together and agree enough about what to do with a 10,000 acre piece or a 20 or a 50,000 acre piece of land. And if you do the right things with that land, then you attract more rain instead of pushing it away. It's just a matter of keeping the ground covered with organic matter. So you have living plants. Instead of the bare soils like a desert, you would cover it with plants that will grow. You pick any plant that will grow there, get it growing, keep the ground shaded, and that cools the temperatures in those areas. And then you have more low pressures than high pressures, and your frequency of rain happens more. And there's many ways to do that, beyond the scope of what we can talk about tonight. But, I mean, there's case studies out there. You can just look them up and watch them. Look up Alejandro Carrillo. Look what he did. His case study is on, you go to understandingag.com and go to past webinars and just look up Alejandro Carrillo. He's in the Chihuahuan Desert and he manages a 20,000 acre ranch, and they are having more rain now than they used to. And they're local rains. They're not the big rains. It doesn't suck more water from the ocean to where you are, but you do get more of the localized thunderstorms for sure. And that's just one of dozens of people around the world who are making this happen. There was a documentary called Molly, and it's a fun documentary. You can watch that, and they claimed the same thing. And there's no science to that one, but they claimed it, and what they're saying is true. So I tend to believe it.
And so, like, what is your recommendation to, say, young people or otherwise, landless people who can't go out there and, make a big, massive change? What kind of actions do you suggest? Just get rich and buy a farm, or what are your
Yes,
thoughts?
yes. So that is one of the things. Poverty is a huge problem in the world. The best thing to do to combat poverty is get rich, get wealthy. We'll start a business, do something that adds value to the world. And then, how many people are going to be able to buy a 1,000,000-acre ranch? I don't know the practicality of that. The more practical answer is learn what you can do for the environment and for the world in a way that actually helps and solves problems. Don't just get on the bandwagon of environmentalism with all the social justice in the world, because those people really don't have a good solution. So you need to follow a group of people who actually have solutions. If you find a group who is turning a desert into a grassland, those people know what they're doing. They're actually changing the climate the way it should be changed. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people around the world doing that. And that's the thing that we don't believe because we never hear about it.
One more question, kind of on this topic. I hear a lot in this particular community, whether it's you or Alan Savory or Gabe Brown, talking about how, we should be able to turn deserts into grasslands or forests or whatnot. But then it seems like there's a large amount of people in the more academic and less boots on the ground agriculture environment who say things like, oh, yeah, well, Arizona's supposed to be a desert. Utah's supposed to be a desert. Nevada's supposed to be a desert. And it's almost a little bit looked down on as if you're, messing with some beautiful masterpiece when you do set out to try and make a desert that's been a desert for a whole human lifetime into a grassland. That presents some significant opposition, especially when you do try and get, 40, 50 farmers together to make a big regional change to trees and biomass and try and attract those rains. Seems like there's some organized resistance from academia based on what is perceived as normal. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that you'd like to share.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, what you're saying is true. The academia world tends to not listen to. They're caught up in their own heads and their own purpose. Their purpose isn't to solve problems. Their purpose is to get people graduated through their program. And that is a terrible thing to say because it makes it sound like I'm against academia. And apparently I am if that's what they're actually doing. Although you always find the professor within the system who is really a fantastic person who isn't that way. And they're doing the right things. But yeah, academia as a whole, it's not very, it's not very good. It's kind of sad because they don't really believe the things that we're telling them, you know. And yeah, as far as the arid West being the arid West, that is their answer. But 200 years ago, it wasn't this way. We have the ancient pictures. There's not very many because there weren't very many cameras back then. But 100 years ago, 120 years ago, we have pictures of like an Indian tribe standing there, and some early photographer took their picture, and the grass is as high as the horse's belly, which would be like 2.5, 3 foot high grass. And the background of that picture shows that grassland going way back behind them. So there are a few pictures, of the past that show our ecosystems being different than they are today. So what that is showing us is that in the last 100 years, the arid West has gone from a mid-succession grassland to an early succession of shrubbery. Now, if you've been studying a little bit about ecological succession, the way it's usually presented is in a non-brittle environment. So the charts, when you look up on Google and you look up the charts, they will show that you have like annual weeds for early succession, you have grasses for mid succession, and then you have shrubs and trees for late succession. But in brittle environments, that's not how it is. In brittle environments, meaning the arid West, Western United States, that would be a brittle environment. That's where I live in Nevada. Early succession is going to be the rampant overtaking of sagebrush growing everywhere. Sagebrush and rabbit brush. So when you drive the Great Basin Highway through Nevada, and mostly what you see is sagebrush everywhere and rabbit brush. It's all, anywhere from 2 feet to 5 feet tall. That's you're going through early succession, meaning it's one step away from bare ground and desertification, which is degraded land that will not support livestock. And if you don't support livestock, you're not growing food for humans. So, we can take a backhoe out here in these areas and dig down, to go make an 8-foot trench and look at the soil. And in many of the valleys in the arid West, we find anywhere from a 2-foot to a 4-foot layer of soil that's in the ground that is a dark brown soil, high carbon soil. And the thing that creates those soils are long, like really tall, we call them warm season grasses, the C4 grasses. And that's what creates that carbon in the soil. And they last for a long time. Like they're perennials, and they'll live for decades, some of those individual plants. But they only live in a symbiotic relationship with a grazer, like a buffalo or an elk or pronghorn or domestic cattle or a sheep. So once the white man showed up, and I'm not against white men showing up, don't get me wrong, but this is just a historical thing that happened. We overgrazed most of North America with our livestock because we didn't know what we were doing. I'm not saying it was bad to do that, other than ecologically it was bad. But now that we know how to do it better, we ought to change, and we could bring the grass back. So the best way to bring it back is with the same tool that overgrazed it, and that would be livestock. Mixed livestock of sheep, goats, donkeys, and cattle. And your biggest number should be cattle. But if you had those 4 animals doing a lot of grazing, they would restore the ecosystems faster than any other way. And that's just what has been shown over the decades. So, I mean, Alan Savory's done it in Zimbabwe and Australia, North America. I don't know how much he worked in Europe, but I know he was there some. The ranchers who have learned this, they've done it miraculously on their own ranches. That's what Alejandro did. They've done it all across Canada. And here again, we never hear about this stuff on the news. The news doesn't really want to show a success story, especially one that they can't explain, because you can't explain this with reductionist science, which is part of the problem with the university that you were talking about. Because the only way that the university will say, yes, this works, is if there can be a peer-reviewed group of people you know, duplicate what they did, and it's super hard to duplicate it unless you can keep scientific uh, your scientific method. You can only have like 1, 2, 3 variables. You get 5 variables, you are overwhelmed and you don't know what to do. Well, in the holistic science that we're dealing with, there's dozens. You could have 75 variables. You might even have 300 or 500 variables. You know, a snake slithers across it. Oh, there's another variable. And so how do you control what's happening on 20,000 acres and say, yeah, we know exactly how to do this? So what we have is a set of soil health principles that we go by, and every farmer, rancher, ecologist out there who is following these principles, they are having success. The problem is they're having different success because of all the variables. And so there is no way to do a peer-reviewed study because it's not a reductionist science, it's holistic science. And you know, and so the universities struggle to wrap their mind around it, and so there's nothing to really say that's happening. But yet, you know, you look at the illiterate people in rural China. I mean, they're bringing back forests where there was nothing but blowing sand. You look at illiterate people in the Sahel of Africa, and they're doing the same thing. So there's all these fantastic stories of people out there doing this and making it happen. And the educated people of the world are saying, hey, look, it's actually working. And then they go to study this and they can't quite figure out how to incorporate it into their own environments. And the people who are incorporating it are largely landowners. They're just saying, oh, yeah, we can just try that stuff because it makes sense to people who live on the land. Like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I'll try that. So, anyway, that's a lot of talking. Got anything else?
I think you answered most of my questions. I mean, I have lots of questions, but they're not really this kind of discussion questions, I guess.
All right, let's see if Jason has anything. Jason, you have any questions tonight? Jason's probably just here for the show.
I'm here for the show, Will.
Nice.
I like your sweatshirt, by the way.
Hey, it's pretty cool.
I need to get me one like that. It looks good on you.
Thank you. I like it. Yeah, man, survival garden seeds. That's where we get our seeds. I love it. Okay, if that's all the gardening questions tonight, obviously some of this was political, but if that's all the questions tonight, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And we will be back next week, same time, same place. Good night.